Welcome to The Conscious Entrepreneur, the only podcast 100% dedicated to the well-being of entrepreneurs. It's where founders come to sharpen their edge from the inside out and lead with clarity, connection, and purpose, without buying into hustle culture or burning out. Hit subscribe right now so you never miss an episode. Let's get started. Welcome to The Conscious Entrepreneur podcast, Cait Donovan. I'm so happy to have you here. You are a leading expert in burnout. Cait, what we're talking about today is a systemic look at burnout. And we're thinking of this in the context of a leader in an organization that may be able to influence the culture that's being created in the organization. What are some of the first signs that a leader should look for to recognize that burnout may be happening either with pockets of people, teams, or even more broadly?
So the World Health Organization definition of burnout says that burnout has three components. The first is exhaustion, emotional, mental, physical. The second is cynicism and depersonalization. And the third is a lack of productivity or lack of impact. So what we see, what that looks like is people start complaining more. People start saying a lot more negative things. Any sort of change or suggestion gets a lot of pushback and negative feedback, right? People are stuck in this really cynical cycle that they can't get out of. And then we see that productivity starts to drop. So burnout is really costly in a company. And then we see that turnover starts to increase. So if you're getting to the point already where turnover is increasing, that's when we really need to emergency, let's do something yesterday. But what I want to warn people of is if you did an employee survey and say you have 100 employees and it came back that 10 people are saying that they have a burnout problem and none of them are on the same team. They're all in different parts of the business. You do not have a burnout problem.
Good to know. What do you have? What problem do you have?
You have 10 employees that are in bad jobs.
Okay.
Maybe they disagree with their managers. Maybe they have too much previous trauma they haven't dealt with themselves. Maybe they're in jobs that are not well aligned to their skill set. Various small things could be true here. But
there are 10 interventions maybe need to happen in that case.
Yeah. And some of those interventions are just simply allowing somebody to go to a company that has values that are more aligned with theirs. Right. We're not ever going for zero turnover, and we're not really ever going for zero burnout because that's
or 100% employee satisfaction.
Exactly.
But what would be signs that something culturally is amiss that we need to respond to?
Yeah. So on a cultural level, we're seeing huge levels of turnover. We're seeing really negative speak within the organization. We're seeing stronger resistance to change. We're seeing lack of innovation and lack of creative problem solving. We're seeing relationship conflicts going through the roof. All of these things are signs that culture is not working, people are not feeling good, and it is starting to leak out and spill over. Okay, so when you are the CEO and you have these inklings that things are happening, or you're a leader in your organization and you have inklings that you're starting to see pockets of burnout, or you're even just feeling it. Maybe if you don't have exactly the data to support this belief, you kind of feel it for yourself. How do you recommend a leader responds to this? Is it something you just openly acknowledge? Do you have a big company meeting? Do you go work directly with teams that you suspect are suffering more than others? What kind of intervention do you help leaders formulate? So it depends on what you said is really important. Is this an overall company problem, or is this a pocket problem? If it's a pocket problem, the first thing you need to do is go to the owner of that pocket. Who is the leader of that pocket? And find out if they are in a place of burnout. Because sometimes having a leader in a place of burnout, that will spill over into their teams. Burnout is contagious. We do not get to help other people avoid burnout when we are burnt out. It does not work that way on an energetic basis. It's not possible. You can't protect people when you're the one suffering. So the first thing you have to do is find out what's going on with the leader. The second thing you have to do is the leader is not fine. They need one-on-one executive coaching. If the leader is fine, you have to find out if the leader is aware that their pocket is having issues. If the leader is unaware that their pocket is having issues, your next step is to go into your leadership development training, if you have any, and figure out what was missing. Why does this leader not know that their people are suffering? What is going on here? Then you're going to want to do a quick overview. Is this situation toxic? You want to do this as a leader before somebody brings it to you. And according to the research, there are 4 things that make a culture toxic. It's not having a bad day, being insulted once in a while, feeling offended once in a while, being triggered sometimes. None of those things are a toxic workplace. That's just life. A toxic workplace is consistent incivility, harassment, bullying, and ostracism, according to the research. So if there is bullying, if there is harassment, if people are being set aside, right, if they're being ostracized and pushed out, right, if all of those things are happening, then you've got a deeper problem to work on. If none of those things are happening, the leader's okay, and the people are burnt out, then we start looking at that group of people and how they interact with one another. Are there relationship mismatches here? Are these people that technically are okay at their jobs, but just don't work well together? So there's a huge diagnostic process that you have to go through to get to a proper solution. And this is the thing that people don't want to spend the time on most commonly.
I see. And so if you wanted to bring someone into your organization to help with these kinds of evaluations, I'm assuming that's something that your company would do, BurnBOLD. But tell me, maybe would there be an HR professional who could lead these conversations? And what does this process kind of look like from the outside?
Yeah, it's actually better that the company itself not be involved in the diagnostic process. Right? Because HR is designed to protect the company. That's their job. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but that is their function. So I don't want that to get in the way of us finding the proper information. So it's much better when we start out that we go first to leadership and we do one-on-one interviews with key leaders that you tell us are important. Through those conversations, we usually figure out what comes next. But I think one of the difficulties in this space is that people want to know what the entire process looks like from start to finish. And I can't tell you that today. I can't tell you that until after I start looking at the layers. Let me talk to these 4 leaders that you've said are absolutely key. Let me talk to them first. And then I'll tell you what the next step looks like. And then after the next step, I'll tell you what the step after that looks like. Because until we really know what's going on, we're just guessing.
It's a very bespoke process to kind of get to the root causes and try to solve those.
It has to be.
Yeah, it has to be. And so you recommend bringing someone from the outside in to do this work. And then if you could just share with our listeners, maybe what are some of the common interventions that you do recommend? What are some of the things that generally are happening at the end of this process? Because we do want a little peek into
Of course.
So then what?
So one of the ones that happens in almost every company that most people adopt and is easy and cheap and
effective.
Easy. Yeah, and effective is something that Jennifer Moss, who's a journalist who wrote a book on burnout and then wrote a follow-up book called Why Are We Here? About being in the workplace. And Jennifer Moss has this concept called positive gossip.
Okay.
So it's not just about giving positive feedback, which is part of the burnout protection factors that came out of the research of Moslock and Leader. Like they realized that not having enough positive feedback can create burnout vulnerability in your individuals. But what Jennifer found is that this positive gossip is when we are talking about, that would be like if you and I right now had a conversation about somebody not in the room and then somebody else overheard it.
Yes.
And so what that does in the people of the company says, well, if they're saying nice things about her when she's not around, maybe they're saying nice things about me when I'm not around. And then you start to say nice things about somebody else when they're not around. And by design, we increase the level of psychological safety and trust within a company without doing standardized exercises where we use only a certain type of word. We always say challenge instead of problem. And we always say, like all of these sort of very prescriptive, sort of very stuffy plans. We just start positive gossip around the company.
And that's an easy thing that anybody could do today.
Simple.
Yes. It reminds me, as a parent, one of the things that my husband and I used to do is say nice things or encouraging things when we knew our daughter could hear us.
Yeah.
So she heard us talking about her in a positive way, and that made her feel good. And this is, basically the same thing in action within your team or your company.
And building it in just creates an entire different energy.
What are some of the other sort of things that you recommend for people?
The other thing, one of the big things is to ensure that your company values are the company values that are actually acted out. So if you have this like beautiful, very well designed wall that has your company values and all sorts of different colors and icons and it's flashy, but they're not lived out in your company, you are breaking trust. You're doing the opposite of the positive gossip. You're breaking trust immediately for all of your employees. This is a huge BRF, burnout risk factor, a huge one. So your job as a leader is to really take a look at the values that are acted out and the values that you claim to have and make sure they match as much as possible. This does not mean that you have to start acting out values that you're not currently acting out, but it might mean that you have to update the values that are on the wall. Like we don't have to always go to this idealized version of everything, but who are we really? And let's be true to that instead of trying to be something that we're not.
You talked about these burnout risk factors, BRFs. Are there 100 of them or are there 5? There's
1,000 of them. The issue, I think, I've said the issue a lot in this episode because there's so many things that I think that are a little bit below the surface that people don't quite yet understand. And BRFs, there's workplace BRFs. And now I'm writing a book about all 6 buckets, but there's workplace BRFs, there's personal BRFs, there's cultural BRFs, environmental BRFs, health BRFs, and family BRFs. All of those things also have BPFs, burnout protection factors, works just like SPF, but instead of against the sun, it works against burnout. So all of those things also have BPFs. And sometimes when we're doing an analysis, what we are looking for, Sarah and I, is this balance between what are your BRFs versus your BPFs. You are never going to have a company that doesn't have any risk factors. It's not reasonable.
Would it be right to think that if we were doing more education with our company and within our company and with our teams about these burnout protection factors and helping to build more of those into our culture rather than try to eliminate the burnout, but instead make us stronger and more able to be resilient in the face of these challenges, would that be an approach that you recommend? And if so,
no.
Great. Okay. And terrible idea.
And no, because if we're not doing both at once, then we're gaslighting people. And we are spiritually bypassing problems. And we're saying, no, just work on these protective factors and all these risk factors that we're creating for you don't matter. And that's not true. And we're also telling people, we're letting people off the hook for their personal risk factors. If you created a utopian workplace, I am still coming into that workplace with my bag of trauma over my shoulder, my history, my coping strategies, my own internal values, my way of functioning, my way of viewing work, all of it, my way of talking to people. And I throw my bag into the middle of the floor. And if it doesn't match everybody else's bags, at least enough, I will burn out in your utopia. Because my stuff is not taken care of. So when we do not spend any time on the burnout risk factors, we are not allowing people the ability to control their own personal controllables and to worry about the risk factors that they are bringing into the workplace as individuals, because this is not just about a company. A company has its work to do, sure, but every single person that works there does too. This is not something we do alone. This is a very overlapping scenario We've got to do this together. So if we're going to do it together, we've got to do both parts together too.
And so does the personal part kind of happen, in your opinion, through executive coaching? It sounds like that was one of the solutions that kind of come out of the toolkit. Yeah.
It can happen through executive coaching. That's how we do it because we are not therapists. But there are people that I recommend therapy to. There are people that I recommend go through trauma therapy. There are people that we recommend go through somatic processing, somatic experiencing. There are people that we send to acupuncture. There are people that we send to, depending on what their needs are. But there is on an individual level, we can't always expect that a workplace is going to completely adjust to us. And we are sort of going in that direction where things are becoming more individualized, even within companies. But there's only so far that can go. There still have to be overall unifying factors that people can sort of at least control a little bit. And they're not going to please everybody. And that's okay.
Yeah, I think as a leader, it's easy to take on every problem and feel, very, very responsible for everyone's personal experience of your company and their own experience of their work. Yeah. But what I'm hearing you say is, at least being responsive and caring, listening and asking the questions to identify where it may be happening in your organization, and then going in and sort of becoming more having more direct conversations with the leadership of either those pockets or even overall, to evaluate what may be happening and bringing in outside help if that's what you find. Do you have advice for how you might be able to protect your people if, as leader of a company, you yourself are already noticing that you're suffering a little bit of burnout?
Your best protection for your people when you're burnt out is getting help with your burnout. If you do not figure out how to manage it with support, and that doesn't have to be me, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. That can be therapy. That can be, sometimes you have an anxiety disorder and you need anxiety medication. Sometimes that's the support you need. It depends. But if you are dealing with burnout and you are not dealing with the fact that you are dealing with burnout, you cannot, in that state, protect anyone from anything. You are patient zero in a burnout pandemic. Your first stop is always your doctor. Your first stop is always a physical. Because if we find out that you are feeling exhausted and you can't manage your stuff and everything's a disaster, but you have extremely low vitamin D and B12, that might solve the issue. I do not want to go through 6 months of executive coaching with you if you have an iron deficiency.
It's great advice. So see your doctor first. Stop 1. See your doctor. Stop 2 is?
Stop 2 is what are you comfortable with? You either have to find a therapist or you have to find a coach. I don't care which one you start with. You're probably going to need both at some point, but find an outside support.
Great advice. And then you follow their advice. I mean, you hire an expert and you follow their advice. Yeah, how do you then, as you're working with your team, I know you said when you're patient zero, you can't protect your team, but what can you do?
Be transparent.
So share with them kind of how you're feeling and what's going on with you.
Yep. Hey guys, this is what's happening. This is what I realized. This is how I'm taking care of it so that it doesn't spill over into you. I recognize that it probably already has in some ways that I'm not quite yet aware of. If anybody is feeling anything similar, please let me know and we'll do our best to create some sort of support system for you. But I am dealing with this because I want to be better here and at home. And I can't do that without some support right now. So that's what I'm doing. You don't have to tell them why. You don't have to give them your family history. You don't have to talk about your traumas or your triggers or just, hey, this is what's going on. Chances are you guys knew this before I did. That'll get a giggle because they did. Mm-hmm. I had a leader once say that she was like protecting her people for almost 2 or 3 years while she was dealing with all the hard stuff. And after these 2 or 3 years where she was like really pushing through, her whole team sat her down at an intervention And they were like, you are intolerable. We cannot work with you. You need to go get some help. We adore you. We know how good you can be, but you are not it. And you have not been it for a very long time. And you are destroying how this feels for all of us. And we mean that in the best possible way. We are not trying to harm you right now, but this is not tenable. And that's what led her to get help.
Wow.
Literally being told, like, you've got to, please stop doing what you're doing. You think that you're protecting us. You are not. You're making everything worse.
Well, we don't want anyone who's listening to this show to get to that point. So I'm hoping that some of the things that you've shared will be able to be internalized and a little self-reflection and maybe take the recommended steps that you've shared today. I'd like to leave with maybe one last question, because you and I have talked about this a couple of times. You know that there are sometimes some very insidious, subconscious patterns that we create that actually increase the risk of burnout in organizations. And I'd love for you to maybe share some of those so that people who are listening a light bulb might go off. If this is you, listen up.
Yeah. So a lot of us in childhood, whether we had trauma or not, I think we like to, right now, trauma is a really big topic. So we like to talk about it all the time. And sometimes it's not really trauma. It's just life. But you develop coping mechanisms that are very successful for you for a very long time until they're not. These coping mechanisms typically look like perfectionism. They look like people pleasing. They look like hyper independence and the inability to ask for help. So when we see these patterns, this is why therapy is sometimes useful. And sometimes this can come out in coaching too. When you start to understand that you are living out family relationships and family patterns in your workplace, then you can break them down. Oh, I'm stuck in this people-pleasing mode because I hired a CFO who's exactly like my father, who I had a codependent relationship with because he had his own issues, right? And then when you see that happening and when you know that's happening, you can start to break down the problems in those relationships and start treating each other like adults. Because the thing that happens with all of these like insidious coping mechanisms is we don't treat each other like adults. We come in and with these weird parent-child or sibling relationships that are not appropriate for the workplace, but that we're playing out all day, every day without realizing them.
What should you do if you realize that that's happening?
Well, the first thing you do is you have to get honest about it, right? Like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I hired my sister who I've been in competition with my whole entire life. That's, people say you marry your, the opposite sex parent or whatever. Like this is that you do it at work too. So if you find yourself in a perfectionist cycle because you've hired a person that requires that of you the same way that your mother did, you get to then decide, I never, ever, ever will give anybody advice to cut down their perfectionism or their people pleasing or any of that, because those are the things that keep you safe. And I don't want to increase your lack of safety. The question then becomes, how can I use this perfectionism when it's really useful and in a way where I can still be in my body while I do it, instead of using it as a mechanism that protects me and allows me to abandon myself so that I can please this other person. So you just have to start really looking at it and using it intentionally instead of having it use you. And then you break that down.
Back to your BurnBOLD concept, right? Is that there are ways that we can take these tendencies that we have and use them to our advantages.
Exactly.
Tell us, I'd love maybe 2 examples, if you could give us examples to help illustrate these points. What is an example of how we can use these burnout risk factors and turn them into a positive that works for the company? I just don't know that I've got the same vision that you have. So help me see what that could look like.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily about like changing any of the risk factors or protection factors. It's about understanding what's going on and seeing that sometimes if you're the CEO and you hired a CFO who's your father, and that requires perfectionism from you, then you act like a perfectionist, and that perfectionism trickles down throughout the entire company. So then the issue doesn't become like, change this risk factor. It's like, oh, how am I demanding perfectionism from my people without even saying it? And how can I shift my behavior so that's no longer required? And so that might be that you stop, you might be a person who writes back to an email where there's a spelling mistake and corrects it. And then you decide to stop doing that. So now your people are not on edge. They're just writing to you without double and triple and quadruple checking their words to make sure they didn't put TEH instead of THE. And it doesn't even matter because that word is innocuous. So things like that. Where are you demanding this behavior from other people without even realizing it because of patterns that you are stuck in? And then how can we shift away from them in really small ways at a time? Because most of this stuff people are not aware of. It's just these little tiny things that are happening.
What's another example?
I want to think of a real one. Oh, this is a good one. I worked with an organization once where everything was urgent. They had an urgency thing because the leader, the CEO, had an urgency thing himself. The family was always fast. They were always on time. They were always pushing everything. There was this constant sense of urgency. He took a sabbatical. We did a little tiny bit of work together. He took a sabbatical, came back and said that everybody in the company was now allowed to ask the question. Anytime anything felt like there was an internal pressure, anyone in the company, anyone at all, from top to bottom, bottom to top, can ask, is this truly urgent? ? He said it changed the entire way that they function, top to bottom, and that they ended up 2 months later, their productivity went up by 30%.
Wow.
So that urgency that he thought was helping and good and useful and necessary to get things done so he wouldn't procrastinate or wouldn't, dropping that urgency increased their productivity.
That's a great example.
That was a fun one.
Yeah. That's excellent. So Cait, if people are interested in talking to you more about their organizations or themselves, I know that you do work with folks on executive coaching with you is possible. And then also with the coach on your team, doing more group type work. Is that
yes,
my correct understanding?
Sarah Vosen is our director of coaching, and she runs everything that is not executive coaching.
Outstanding. And then, of course, you do a lot of keynote speaking as well, right?
That is my main thing that I do. It's the thing I love to do most. On top of, actually, I would say it's 50-50 between keynoting and advisory work. I love to be on a retainer system where somebody's going through something and they're calling me and saying, hey, this is the thing that came up today. What should we do? Like, I love being in an advisory position. It's how I react best. I'm really good at problem solving and finding the right way through. So that's two of my favorite things to do. But yeah, keynoting, advisory, coaching.
And in your 9 years of experience, I think your ability to diagnose what's going on and have already seen so much evidence of different ways to work through opportunities really is invaluable to an organization that might need someone to just kind of come in and make a very bespoke solution that's right for them. So I want to thank you, Cait, for being on the show today and for sharing your experience. We'll put all the ways that people can connect with you. But I think it's been a really great and refreshing conversation to understand not just the buzzword of burnout, but to understand it in a more meaningful way and how to avoid it within our organization. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
Thanks for watching The Conscious Entrepreneur. If something landed for you, will you leave a comment? I'd love to hear what you thought. And if you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Thanks so much, and I'll meet you here next week.